Welcome to the Together 2024 Disability Film Festival. I'm Gosling. I'm the artistic director of the festival. This is being run as a webinar. So if you would like to join in the conversation, you can either put questions and points into the chat or just say in the chat that you'd like to be a panelist, and then we will do what's necessary behind the scenes so that you can put your camera and microphone on and join in. To make it more accessible, I'm just going to spotlight one or two people at a time because it's easier then for people to be able to see the interpreter. We've got some questions in the chat, and that's really just to start us off with. The overall subject is, what do disabled actors need from film directors? And this is building on yesterday's conversation about writing disabled characters. We would all, I know, like to see more disabled people represented on screen in all sorts of different genres and all sorts of different parts and from all sorts of different communities. So, in order to do that, we need to be a bit clearer, I think, with directors about what disabled actors need. And I'm going to start off by bringing in Nicholas Bird, who was with us yesterday on the panel. And one of the reasons I'm bringing in Nick first is because he was on the panel. He's a bit more familiar with what we're doing. And tell us a little bit, again, for people who are new, about your film, and then what you've learned from the experience of making that film and from your own son about what in particular young actors and particularly young neurodiverse actors need.
Yeah, hi, my name's Nicholas Bird. I did a film called The Imagination of Crumbs, and it's based on my son with autism. Um, I think the biggest thing that directors should know or learn from everything is getting to know your actors. That's the biggest thing, is especially actors who are on the spectrum. Every little idiosyncrasy is different. And I'm an acting instructor as well. So I teach uh, actors who are on the spectrum, adults. And I knew one of the actors, when he was done hearing my notes, he would start to rock back and forth. So I knew that was it. So I couldn't be long with my directing notes with him. Then there was another student who loved to talk, and it's all about knowing them and finding out what works and what doesn't for specifically for them. That's the biggest thing. The actor I worked with who played Crumbs, um, he was very inquisitive. He wanted to learn about the cameras, and he wanted to learn. So I told him after every take, I'll give him like a fact about a camera, or I'll tell him about the camera, and he was like, okay. So it's just about learning their little idiosyncrasies and learning about their traits, because we're all different. And especially working with actors on the spectrum, it's learning about them. And I think that's the biggest thing. And also I think the other thing is treating them like actors, just every other actor on there as well. Like that's the other thing too, is no special treatment. We're just going to treat you, but you have to figure out every little thing about that person. And it makes it a little bit easier, because in that way you're not getting frustrated as a director, they're not getting frustrated as an actor, and we go on this journey together.
I think that's such great advice, and it really seems to me to be echoing what people were saying yesterday about research, for writers, the importance of doing your research. And it seems to come back again, the importance of spending that time. And I don't know to what extent you think we've actually got less time now as filmmakers, as pressures kind of build up in terms of filming days. Do you think directors, in your wider experience, do you think directors are having enough time with actors, whether disabled or not? Or do you think there's more of a tendency to rush now?
I think it's a tendency to rush. I feel that We got to get it out now. We got to get it out now. We got to get it. And I think that's the problem with a lot of the films today. But I feel that a lot of rehearsal time, because then you get to figure out the actor, you get to figure out the person if you have rehearsal. My son, he did an episode of The Good Doctor a while back, and I said, do you know your lines? He goes, yeah, I know my lines. I said, are you sure? Yeah. And I went over his lines and he read it twice. So very different from another actor on the spectrum. So it's just learning. And I was like, okay, like you got it. So he was good. But the other actor may not have that same type of style of working. So I feel that rehearsals are always key because then you get to find out about the actor and you get to find out, like I said, their little idiosyncrasies, what works, what doesn't work for them. And then you can go from there. And when you get time to film, there is no rushing. There is no, oh man, he's not going to get this or she's not going to get this or whatever it is. It's like you know exactly what it is. And I feel that there's a lot of filmmakers out there today that don't want to rehearse, they just want to get the camera, they want to go and they sort it out in editing or whatever it is. And they're doing not only their film a disservice, but they're doing the actors a disservice because it's a process. It's a huge process. It's a long process sometimes. And if you don't give them the opportunity to do that, then you're taking that away from them. So,
I think that's a very strong point, and I think very relevant. I met a film director, oh, must be about 6 years ago in Canada now, who was explaining that although he'd cast, and he was very undefensive about it, which I appreciated, but although he'd cast disabled people in supporting actor roles, he'd had people cripping up in the lead parts. And one of the reasons he gave for that is that the rehearsals needed would have taken too long.
yeah.
And I do get budgets, particularly in the UK, with the cost of living increases and the cost of electricity. But as you say, a film is such a big project. At what point do you decide it's going to be okay just to have shorter rehearsals? And therefore you don't cast somebody who's going to give an authentic performance.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's all depending on what it is and what you're doing and the project that you're doing. And I feel that there could be some directors who just don't want to deal. They think it's cool. Like they think it's cool to have, oh, well, we have, somebody on the spectrum over here, but we're going to put them off to the side. Um, and for me, I would not have done the project unless I had somebody on the spectrum to play that role. Like, and I said that from the very, very beginning when I first started, when I came up with the idea for the project. I will not have somebody not on the spectrum play this character. Um, and I didn't care how long it took for rehearsals. I didn't care how long it took to film it. Um, that's just what I wanted to do, just because to be authentic and bring that to life. I wanted to make sure that that was a thing. But I think everything now is microwave filmmaking, just quick instead of letting it marinate and letting it sit and go. They want it now. So I think that's the biggest thing. I feel like my takeaway from that is.
Yes, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. And one of the issues, we had a discussion about cripping up. Again, people were gloriously undefensive, which was really helpful. But this is going back quite some years at the film festival when we had it in Stratford. And we had a couple of filmmakers who just said, well, it didn't even occur to me, to which, your heart does somewhat sink. But there were also student filmmakers who were saying, well, we had to get our film out in time for graduation. But one of the figures that we shared at yesterday's event was, I think, something like 53% of disabled people don't find these representations of disabled people convincing. And I always say, when you have these characters kind of cripping up, they're only convincing to people who don't know real disabled people. And I think
Yeah.
that's it becomes part of the problem and part of the solution that we don't have these authentic images of disabled people, and therefore people accept images that to disabled people are clearly very, absolutely not right. Um, do stay with us as a panelist, Nick, but can we just pop a camera on Sahira as well? Some of you will recognize Sahira Khan. Sahira is a writer, an actor, and a director. And we've shown films in the past festivals with Sahira writing and acting. And indeed, Sahira's also performed as an actor live in our festival. So it's great to welcome Sahira back. And I wondered, Sahira, there's not many directors casting deaf actors, but there are some. You know, what would what would help deaf actors most for directors to know?
To show the natural, the authentic, the real people. That's it really. Just to show who they are, just to, not specific details, but just, if there's a deaf person that signs, or is it a deaf person that's oral, you just show that person, meet that person's deaf community and authenticity.
And if you go for an audition, do you find that there's interpretation available, or is it really difficult to get an interpreter?
I've heard lots about that actually. I know that at the moment there is a struggle to find interpreters. And when you've got the cast, they don't think about the funding for interpreters. Some obviously set it up at the self, or if they're an actor, they might have their own access to work so that they can provide an interpreter. But it's not easy. I think it depends on the situation.
And do you think directors are actually consulting deaf people when they're creating roles for deaf actors?
For myself, I'm thinking about myself. I've only saw a spotlight production. And I know that they did have some sort of consultation with deaf, but just a few, really, just a few. I know it was included with Zoom. Triple? C triple? Oh, it's an organisation. I know that when they were casting with Zoom, they did include some deaf people in to ask some questions.
So it doesn't sound like directors are doing a lot of independent research into deaf culture.
That's a good question. I don't really know. I think some are aware, maybe. There's some awareness, maybe.
I think one of the things that I always find about the film festival is that when we have strong deaf films in it, I learn so much about deaf culture. But there's very few films including deaf people, unless it's specifically coming from deaf culture. And I wonder how we can get directors to watch more deaf films so that they can learn from them.
Yeah.
And for any directors out there, there is BSLB TV, which Kris, can you remind me of the other name for that? The online deaf television channel where we've shown quite a lot of films in the past, but they're all free to view on the line. Like I said, it's BSLB TV.
BSLB, BSLBT, but it's BSL Zone, ZONE as well.
Yes, BSL Zone. So, you know, if there's directors watching this now or watching the recording, you know, there's a huge range of programs and films that have been made going back many years in that. And I think it also shows the range of deaf actors. You know, I have to say, Sahira has a very big range in herself, but there's you know, there are so many really great deaf actors out there. And I don't think they're getting what they need from directors because we're not seeing them. So I know we've got Marilyn. Yeah, so we have Marilyn on the panel. Would you like to join us, Marilyn?
Hi, yes, and I think this panel is a first start in sharing, and I'm happy you're recording it.
Yeah, I was going to say, let me just get a spotlight on you. So I'm also going to just read a contribution from the chat at this point. Julie Newman, who's also our chair, says there were more deaf films submitted this year from overseas than the UK. And how much of this has been because the cuts to the arts in the UK has negatively impacted on deaf films? Well, I think you can, if you look at the festival this year across the programmes, the balance in terms of English speaking films has really shifted too. There's much more prominence in terms of American and to some extent Australian and Canadian films, and fewer English speaking films from the United Kingdom, same as there's, I think, almost no deaf content from the United Kingdom. So I would say that we are certainly seeing the impact of the cuts in the UK on the films that are coming through. I mean, things are always changed slowly because films take a long time to make, but it's certainly been very noticeable to me that there's fewer films across the board from the UK. But Marilyn, let me bring you in now.
Sure. So my selection was a music video called My Life Between the Rains, and it focuses on Paige Bayless, who has cerebral palsy, and her equestrian journey. Our feature is in post-production, but our music video was done first and foremost. And I hired a songwriter to understand Paige's story and her struggle and write the lyrics to match that. And then I took those lyrics and then matched part of the film that we had filmed over many months to highlight and elevate the lyrics. But some of the points I wanted to make, like Nick said, was as a filmmaker, plan your shot list to elevate and highlight your actors when they can work the best, right? Like for Paige, as an example, we had to film her writing mostly in the morning, and all of her speaking worked better for her in the morning as well, because at the end of the day, her voice was very tired, and her body was tired. We also took advantage of multicam shots, so we wouldn't have to turn the whole set around, for different angles. And that really helped her using multiple cameras. And then I think just incorporate for the directors to incorporate extra time, because you never know what's going to happen, to have the extra time, to not put additional pressure on your actors.
Oh, those are such useful, practical points, Marilyn. And I love the one about multicam, because I think so many disabled actors, and indeed just older actors, time is valuable. And it's also where you can save time as a director using a multicam shoot to start with.
Yeah.
I see we have Eve Smith with us, who indeed joined the panel yesterday. So I think if we just perhaps take the spotlight off Sahira and Marilyn for a moment and bring in Eve and bring Nicholas back. And I just want to go back to the subject of young actors. So just take a minute to swap it over. Brilliant. So welcome, Eve. And Eve has just finished her drama degree and is now is now on sick leave before beginning a career in screen acting, but in fact has already starred as a teenager as Jodie Whittaker's daughter in a series for Sky. And I want to know, Eve, when you're well enough to go to work, what do you need from a director to get the best performance out of you? I know you've got some recent experience as a supporting artist in a BBC film. So what was helpful when you were filming with the BBC?
Like them talking, kind of what Nick was explaining earlier, like talking to us about what we could and couldn't do, and like if we needed, like what I noticed in when Barbara met Alan is because most of us were all disabled. If we needed to take a break for whatever reason, they would allow us to do that, which I thought was quite respectful.
Brilliant. And were there any things that you found difficult that you think they could have done differently?
What in either of what I've been in, or
Yes, I think in anything you've done, what could have a director done differently that would have been better for you? I mean,
so it might take me a while to think about it because I know.
let me just ask you a question. I remember you and your mum having to constantly change hotels, even though you were in the same area. And it struck me that you would have actually had a lot more rest if they just managed to do one hotel booking that held for that particular location shoot, and that something as simple as that can be really disruptive. And I'm sure it's disruptive to anyone, but do you remember that being something that was an issue for you?
Yeah, and because it's kind of, I know it's sometimes difficult for everyone, but it's sometimes easier to stay with the one place because then it's in your memory and it's easier to get to and from as well and takes up less time. When we
Yeah,
could be filming on set rather than travelling to the set, if that makes sense.
it absolutely does. And that's that. I mean, it's what directors need to be telling their production managers, isn't it? It's not about just trying to think about hotels one night at a time or
And
you.
sorry, Drew, what I did find helpful when I was doing this work was doing like a run through, like a read through before we went on, because it made me feel more confident and more relaxed.
So that's having a read through directly before you go on set to do the recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, again, that just sounds like a really practical thing. And maybe it just takes an extra few minutes, but if you need less takes as a result because everybody feels more confident, I think what I mean,
Yeah.
practice. If it's good practice for everybody, then it works for this.
Also, sometimes what people forget is having a few extra minutes doesn't always matter if it's like worth something, if that makes sense. And as disabled people, no matter if you're disabled or not, you shouldn't have to like beg for it, if that makes sense.
Yes, and it doesn't say much about how actors are being
Or
treated.
you shouldn't feel shy about asking for it. I think that's what I mean.
Yes, but I think you're right. Sometimes people do have to sort of appear grateful if they get a sandwich and an opportunity to go to the loo every 5 or 6 hours. And that's really not how we should be treating actors, is it? Did you want to add anything to that, Nick?
Yeah, I think the rehearsals and I think the listening to your actors right? When we were doing Crumbs, we had the shot set up and it was getting right around lunchtime, and we just wanted to get this one shot before we had to move the camera. And the actor's therapist was with us, and she actually got a producing credit because she helped out so much. And she said, "No, he's going to eat." And we were like, okay, cool. He's going to eat. Like, we're ready to go whenever he's done. And we let him take his time. And I think it was like a 40-minute lunch. Okay. Like, we're shots ready to go. When he's done, let's go. And we didn't push it. We knew he was, we didn't want to upset that area of it. And it's just about listening to the actors. That's the biggest thing is we're going to get our shot. We're gonna get it. Don't worry about it. What do you need from us? And I think that was the one of the biggest things was like, are you good? Are you okay? Yeah, I'm fine. All right, cool. Do you need a minute? Yeah, I need a couple minutes. All right, cool. Like we're ready to go when you are. So it's just about listening and being accommodating, and um I think that's the biggest thing is just is listening and seeing what they need.
And of course, that gets a better performance.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think again, when you look at some of the films that come out which have got terrible reviews despite everybody's best efforts, you think, well, at which point were they rushing? There's only so much you can do in the editing suite. You can only edit with the material you've got. Now,
Yeah.
I know
Can
we
we just make Ben a co-host again, please? He dropped out, so he's back in.
thanks, Nina. So for our safety and security, actually no, Ben isn't back in here. So oh, there we go. Right, sorry about that. So yes, we have Alexis Carl on the panelists, and I wonder, Alexis, if you want to pop your camera on, and we'll maybe swap you for Eve for a minute. And then Eve, if you have a think about if there's anything else you'd like to say, and then we'll bring you back in again. Alexis, welcome back.
Good morning from New York City. Thank you so much.
It's always so great to have such an international group of people with us for the film festival. I know you've been listening to the conversation and you've seen the questions in the chat as well. So I'm just going to say, what point would you like to make first?
Well, first of all, I want to just say to Nicholas and Marilyn, just all your points are so, I had written down a whole bunch of things and I was like, tick, tick, tick. Just to hear other directors talk about, or rather confirm these practices and ideas and things that we really should think about and really to be actually inclusive within our work is very amazing and important, because sometimes I think that it's easy to feel, or self-guess, am I doing the right thing? Am I creating a safe, good environment for my actors, for my performers? So I did Traveling Light, produced by Bodywise, and it's a dance piece that we shot in a forest. And so I wrote a few different things, practices that I specifically, with the producers from Bodywise Dance, implemented to make our performers more comfortable. And one of them, which I thought was kind of interesting for a dance piece, if anyone else has done dance films, most directors have, usually you're working with one kind of music, and so everyone's on tempo or everyone's in like a specific choreography. But we did a lot of improvisation, specifically so that we could highlight each one of the dancers for their specific personality within movement. And one of the things that we did was each of them we played different music depending on what they wanted. So like one of my favorite performers, I love them all. One of the performers, he danced to Depeche Mode. And then another performer wanted to dance to Tchaikovsky. So you can imagine from Depeche Mode to Tchaikovsky, and someone else was doing Taylor Swift, right? And so as a filmmaker, director, and cinematographer for this, it was very it was like I had to say, this is what they need, right? And the producers were the one who suggested, and the performers were like, that's what I need to be able to dance. I had to figure out, okay, even on camera, how am I going to link this, balance this? Because of course, tempo is different, therefore your body moves differently. Rather than be too structured about it, there's a moment where I was going to say, well, can we maybe all listen to this one? And I could see that the light was like shining bright in my actors' eyes because they were listening to music that they love. And I was like, that's it, that's fine, I'll figure it out, it doesn't matter. I will let the moment be chosen by these performers as opposed to me being strict about it. And I think that was one of the best choices ever. I was so happy collectively that everyone was excited. And then everyone's dancing. I'm dancing with the camera, how could I not? And the result is that these individual moments are individual, and they're not about me and only the way I see that person, through their dance, through their disability. It's how they see themselves linking to the music. And that was a really big learning moment for me. The only other thing, and I had written, and this was something that supports Nick's idea as well, and in my other directorial work, especially I've just done 2 features, there's so much time, everything's time. I always say I have a pocket watch, and I'm like checking that pocket watch, my assistant director is checking the pocket watch. When I was working on this particular film that's in this festival, there were moments where one of my dancers, who is absolutely stunning at movement, just stunning, and I had this whole idea, I'm going to do this beautiful solo of her as the evening, as the light fades and I see her in silhouette and she's doing all these movements that I just love. She's like, I'm tired, I need to sit. And I said, bring a chair and talk to her. And I said, do you feel comfortable moving in the chair? If not, you can just rest. And and knowing I'm gonna lose the shot, and that's okay if so. And she was like, she just said thank you, and she was so happy. And we did a whole improv choreography, thanks to the beautiful choreographers, right in the chair. And it was like very important to say, again, for me as a director, to listen, and not push, and just say, see what she wanted, just listen. So that's all I wanted to say.
And I think it's such an important thing, because what I'm hearing from both of you, and of course also thinking about the performances in your films, is that the performance that you get from a performer as a director is always going to be a better performance if you meet the disabled performer's needs, and indeed any actor's needs. But I think, as we were saying earlier, because the representation of disabled people is so minimal on screen, people aren't necessarily, I think directors are less aware than they will be with other actors and other characters of, what people's needs are and what the potential is. So that listening time, and, and it is a very competitive festival, I think all festivals are, but the performances in both the Imagination of Crumbs and Travelling Light are really, I would certainly recommend them to anybody to watch.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Including that chair-based piece, I can absolutely recall the scene, and it works so well. If there's anybody else who would like to join the panel at this moment, and actually, I know we have panelists, but if there's something that you're burning to say, tell Marcy in the chat, and they will kind of sort things out. So Julie has put a question in the chat. And this is actually for Eve and Sahira. So I'm wondering if we can just swap the spotlights around for a minute and bring back Eve and Sahira. I'm just going to ask Sahira to start her video and see if she's willing to do that. Oh, yes, here's Sahira, here's Eve. So let's just swap those spotlights around.
And just quickly,
Yes, so just bear with us a sec. We've just lost Kris for a minute. I think perhaps I should have done the spotlights. There we go. Yes, so there's a question from Julie Newman for Eve and Sahira. And what she says is, what would you want to prioritise to support deaf and disabled actors if you were funded for your own feature film? So I'm going to come to Eve first and leave Sahira to think about it. And then I'll come back to you again, Eve. So I'm just going to come, what's your instant reaction? And then I'll come back to you for a more thoughtful reaction. But if somebody's just given you a budget to make your own film, what do you want to prioritise in terms of meeting the needs of deaf and disabled actors like yourselves?
Well, it's a good question because I haven't really thought about it, but I guess it's kind of like everything really, but mainly disabled people is spend your money wisely and not just.
So have an access budget. Is that the first thing you do? Because I know that was one of the things that mentioned earlier, where nobody's remembered to put a budget in for the interpreter, nobody's remembered to budget for the support worker.
And
so what you would do is have an access budget.
Yeah, and I don't want to confuse people, but can I say it while it's in my head about one of Alexis's points?
Yes, absolutely.
Basically, when I was filming the smoke, I also got a bit tired when I was running, and what happened was one of the directors kindly said, "Don't worry, sit down. I'll run for you. Just say the lines," which I thought was really helpful.
Yes, because your character was practicing for the Paralympics, weren't they?
Yeah.
It was a little bit beyond, and again, I think it's important for everybody to remember, disabled actors can play other parts. The character doesn't have to have the same impairments and the same access needs. What you bring to that part is your own lived experience, isn't it? But yes, I know when I saw the way that, and they shot it very cleverly in the end, as I recall, because what they did was that you heard the sound of the running, and then you saw Eve touching the fences that she was supposed to be running between.
And it was from a side angle, wasn't it?
Yeah, so that was clever, wasn't it? Where in order to reduce your fatigue, they didn't just give you breaks, they found a different way of filming it that sort of cheated it.
Yeah.
What did you want to add to this, Sahira? It can be Julie's question or any point, really.
I know it's difficult, disabled and deaf actors, to get that funding themselves. I think that is difficult. But for example, BFI and the other, I can't remember the other ones, but when I think you should apply for the funding for short films, you have to do the producers and the directors, and you've got to show them the story or the script beforehand. It's not easy, especially when you're trying to think about what actors you want to be involved in that film. For myself, my experience as an actor being involved in a film, I want to do both the acting and the directing, but I have to use my own money, and it's not easy. I think it's a very good question. I think, where do we get the funding from? The Arts Council not really involved with films, so where do we go to get that funding?
I think it's a very interesting point, and I do wonder whether perhaps Together should be fundraising for a new scheme, because every so often we show films that have been funded through BFI schemes, and we have some films in today's Young Talent Showcase that have come through very low budget BFI schemes. But we've never seen Netflix or Disney Plus or any of the people who've got actual money now running schemes for disabled filmmakers, and let alone emerging ones. But I think you're right, Sahira, we need a fund that's much more accessible. You know, one of the reasons the BFI doesn't like me very much is that every time their figures come out, we're the ones who go, why is there 0 in the figures for disabled people? And every time they have a scheme, they have a target, and every time they have a target, they miss it. And I think we said yesterday the only target they ever meet is for DocFest, which is documentaries, and very often that's about kind of, oh, let's let's make a film about a disabled person doing something completely normal, but we think it's wonderful because they're disabled. I don't mean to sound cynical, but we all know that there's a great many of those films being made. So yeah, I mean, I think maybe we do, not just in the UK but beyond, but particularly in the UK, need to see a fund that is actually supporting first films and new filmmakers. And one of the things that we're really trying to take away from these 2 sessions this weekend is, what can we put into our guide for filmmakers and editors to help them improve the disability film they're making? And I think we've had some great ideas this weekend, including, it has to be said, Marilyn and the multi-camera shoot. And but I think the other thing is, well, what can we practically do? And we've always tried to advocate for filmmakers based on the lessons that we learned through the festival. But I think perhaps we do need to be saying, well, where's the money? Where is the money? Because particularly as disabled people, we can't go and sleep on somebody's floor. We do need to be in a hotel. We do need to pay an interpreter. We do need to eat. We do need to have a lunch break. We can't just work all the way through. And I'm seeing various thumbs up emoticons and things floating up here. So is there anything else, Eve and Sahira, that you would like to add? And then I'll bring Marilyn back in.
All good, thank you, from Shahira. Sorry, Eve. Thank you.
That's right. When I just kind of want to echo what Nick was saying about getting to know the individual person and their needs first, because also it's good to talk to them because they might be too shy. I know I was when I was younger. They might be too shy to express it and tell what their conditions are. So if you talk to them, you're more likely to get to know them, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense, Eve. I mean, I think all of these are really, really good lessons. So Megan Taverner would like to ask, as someone with an acquired disability, how do you navigate past expectations from when you were a non-disabled actor to new access needs, being a wheelchair user and someone with medical devices? I'm in Canada and I'm finding our accessibility standards are behind other countries. I think everybody's accessibility standard is behind the USA's, and the USA's is not great. So that would be the starting point. And I also think it's interesting, Megan, that often as disabled people, depending on our background and our condition, but our own access needs can change. My access needs have changed considerably over the years. So I think it is that same thing that people kind of go, but you didn't used to need this. And you go, well, now I do. So again, I think it's that sort of, maybe it comes back to the talking again. I think negotiating these things is difficult. I think we've had a number of sessions in the past where we've had the trade unions come in, the British trade unions, but I think the equivalent actor unions in other countries are very well worth joining. Most actors unions have somebody who now specializes in disability. Many will have a specific committee. And certainly the last time we had Equity, the Actors Union, in to do a session at the festival, they had some really interesting points to make. But I don't know if anybody else has got experience of negotiating accessibility standards. I mean, I seem to spend most of my life going, excuse me, you've just broken the law again. And I think, again, as disabled people, we're constantly coming, you know, discrimination, unfortunately, is an everyday experience. I'd like to bring back in, I think, if I take Sahira off just for now, and I'm thinking I'm going to bring you back if that's okay, Nicholas, and just to respond to any, you know, to what Eve's just said.
Yeah, it's about, like I said before, the getting to know your actors and what they need, and what did you touched on about getting a better performance from them. Um I also wanted to talk about the budgets and the funding. We didn't it was zero money for Crumbs. I did not spend one single dollar for Crumbs. I feel that being part of a community for filmmakers that want to tell engaging stories is always the best thing. And not being as a director and a filmmaker so selfish that you can't take other people's ideas, or you can't listen to other people, and it has to be about me, my story, my this. It's like it's all of ours, and that's the biggest thing that I would want more filmmakers to start to figure out. Is it's a collective effort, it's a collective group, it's a collective story that we're being told. And I think that's the biggest thing, and just information, and not being so selfish, I think is kind of my take from this. Is I read a story years ago about Stanley Kubrick getting ideas from the custodian, and I was like, well, if Stanley Kubrick can take ideas from a custodian, then like, who, you know what I mean? Like, we can get it from everywhere. I'm not that selfish of a person. So that's the biggest thing I want other filmmakers to realize and to get, is it's not just about me and my story, it's about everybody. And their story is just as important as mine and everybody else's. But that's the biggest thing I want to have everybody take away, and then getting to know the actors, just getting to know them. You know, that was the dance in the chair. You knew that actor to go, hey, this is going to be work best, and then you work that in and wove it into your story and go, and then it actually worked. So listening to other people is the biggest key, and I think that's one of the biggest problems, is everybody is very tunnel vision, and they don't want to give other people other credit for everything. So
And I
that's
think what I like from both of you is the importance of respect. Because if you respect somebody, you take their ideas. If you respect somebody, you listen to them. You know, I'm quite sure Alexis could have forced this person to have danced out of their chair against the sunset, and the light would have been wonderful. But the performance wouldn't have been so great.
Exactly. And you know, the
I
camera reads your, you know, I tend to do a lot of portraiture within my films, and that those nuances of expression, whether it's like face or even hand gestures, things like that, like you said, you know, the performance, it actually gave other people a chance to perform with her along the chair, and we called her. So at that point I was like, I think you're the queen, like you're the queen. And she was like, I'm the queen. And I said, let everyone come to you. And all of a sudden the other performers had this chance to embrace her, or to dance along with her, or to push and pull, and depending on their choice of music and their choice of interaction.
And it's
Yeah.
story. Now, I've got another question that I want to bring on to both of you, and this is from Megan, and it's specifically about audition processes. And Megan would like to know, how do you advocate for access in the audition process? And how do you advocate for proper access on set when most locations in your country are not wheelchair accessible? Megan says that she doesn't want to give up on acting, but sometimes it seems like there are too many roadblocks to even get started again. And we've certainly had young filmmakers in the past and young actors come into film festival sessions and say, well, you know, I got there in my wheelchair and I realized they were filming at the top of the tower, or nobody had budgeted for me to be able to get into a taxi and I can't get on the train, you know, really, really basic stuff. But I think what Megan's really asking is, you know, what would make the directors listen, you know, and how is it, you know, how is it possible to negotiate for access without feeling really damaged by the process? Because I think sometimes we just stop challenging discrimination because it is, or stop putting ourselves in the position where we're going to be discriminated against, because it's just really tough. You know, discrimination hurts, and it hurts your mental health and it hurts your physical well-being. But the last thing we want is for Megan to give up, because what we need is a lot more disabled people in front of the camera as well as behind it. So what can we do, and indeed, you know, to help Eve and anybody else who needs to, you know, because everybody's access needs are different.
Yeah.
But you know, as sympathetic directors,
I think communication. This question is literally the perfect pathway into this discussion, and I think that being, if you know, I think every actor, in a sense, every single actor, there's a certain self-advocacy of what they're comfortable with. I think it's up to the director to also, it's not just up to the actor to say, this is what I need. It's up to the director to be very sensitive enough, aware enough to say, and I do this to every one of my actors, like whomever I choose, whatever age, whatever, you know, I work in lots of different areas. I do a lot of horror, which is very psychologically, sometimes a little bit challenging for actors. And so it's beautiful horror, but it's still horror. And I take that time, I try to at least take that time before every shoot, you know, every moment, major moment of the film, and say, how are you feeling? Do you need anything else? I wrote this in the chat. Are you full? Do you need more food? Have you had enough water? Do you need to rest? Like, yes, I can't do it to the point, I have to keep a schedule, but I also try to make, as a director, I feel it's very much our responsibility to make sure that our actors' needs are taken care of, and every single actor has a different need.
that's,
you know.
and I couldn't, I mean, I'm a very big one on the, as people will know who worked with me in venues, on kind of food, drink and regular breaks. But I want to just finish by going back to this issue of the audition process. It's all very well when you've, you know, when you've cast your actors,
Sure.
and particularly if you're casting a part that you didn't think, you know, default setting in life is actually probably disabled, but the default setting on screen is non-disabled, you know. So if you're turning up, for example, as a wheelchair user, and you know you've come to play a part that doesn't have anything to do with disability, how do you negotiate the access within that audition process? How do you even begin to contact them and go, well, I know this is a call out for such and such, but I use a wheelchair and I just need to check, you know, what's the access like to your rehearsal studio? I don't think we should ever say, would you consider casting a wheelchair user? Because of course we should take it for granted that yes, you would, and it would be illegal not to consider it. But, you know, are there any things, you know, is there anything, because I know your son's acted, Nick, is there anything, you know, that you know, that would help? Because, you know, you're going to you're considering going to an audition, you don't know anybody there, you're in a very vulnerable position, you know, what can get you through that process successfully?
I think what Alexis was saying is it's all about communication, and it's also depending on the level of production. You know, is it a studio? Is it an indie? Is it a student? And I feel, Megan, don't give up. Keep going, Megan. Um, Keep doing it. But I feel that the biggest thing is being an advocate for yourself, and finding other people around you that could be an advocate for you as well, and ask questions. I think the biggest problem that we all have is, I don't want to rock the boat. If I rock the boat, I may not get this role. I may not, oh, I just don't want to ask. And then it becomes a bigger problem later on. And I feel that if you are in a wheelchair, I'm sure there's a casting director. I'm sure there's if it's an independent low budget film, you can talk to the director or producer directly and just say, look, I'm in a wheelchair. Is there anything that, what is there access? Is there this? Is there that? And now put the ball in their court to let them go, oh, you know what? Yeah. And get them thinking about it. And if they don't want to, and if they don't want to do it, then you know what? It just wasn't for you, and move on to the next. And I know that's tough to hear or to say, but you need to be your own advocate for it. And if they're not willing to do it, then that particular production is not a fit for you.
Can
And
I
I
just,
think, yeah,
so,
could
I'm so sorry.
I say there was just a couple of things that I wanted to take from that. And the first one was this idea of community, because you were saying, Nick, about you can make a no budget film because you have a network of filmmakers around you. Now that community is always harder to join if you're disabled, but we can set up online communities. We do have a Facebook group in the UK for disabled filmmakers, and we run ourselves one for young disabled filmmakers. I think there needs to be an international group for disabled actors. And Megan, do get in touch with us if you'd like some support to set something up. I think the other thing I would say is that in my life, sometimes I've been able to turn it to my advantage, because suddenly you're getting the attention of that company more so than somebody else, because you're going, well, actually, I need you to draw your attention to me because I have extra questions. And actually, I have extra questions because I have something to offer that other people don't have. I use a wheelchair. Think how good that's going to look. So, that really is a minority of instances, but I do think that that's possible. And I'm just reading a message. Harry from Finland, who was wonderful. Yes, we used to see you more than once, I think, at Stratford. He's thanking us for the advice, but has to go now. And indeed, it's almost time for us to finish. Thank you for everybody who's contributed. I'm sorry I've not been able to get to absolutely everybody. The recording of this panel is going to be up later in the week. All of the films for today are online and remain online until 12 noon Greenwich Mean Time tomorrow. We have our Young Talent Showcase, we have a climate emergency programme, we have more dance films, more dramas, and more international films. So there really is something there for everybody. We will be announcing the CAT Awards at 9 o'clock GMT tomorrow. So while the festival is still running, and just in time for the socials and the press in the UK in the morning. Thank you to all of the filmmakers and all of the audience members who've supported us today. Thank you to our access workers, Kris Burrow, who's been providing our sign language interpretation, and Norma McKay, who's been providing our captioning. There's lots of applause and emoticons going up for just to let Kris and Norma know. And thanks again to Arts Council England and National Lottery Community Fund for funding it. Nicholas has put his email address into the chat and says very kindly that if anybody wants anything, they can contact it. The recording will be embedded on the festival website, but yes, I will be sending emails to everybody who registered for this, and I'll probably also be sending out an email through Freeway, so you should also know exactly when it goes up. Of course, we would encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Together 2012 CIC, and then you will automatically know when we're adding new things, because we record all of our events and make them available. So indeed, after the film festival's over, you can still enjoy recordings of all of this year's live events on our website. I can't believe it's almost the end of the year, but we will be reopening submissions for next year's festival and we look forward to seeing all of you then. So final thanks to Nina, Marcy and Ben behind the scenes, and I'm going to close this Zoom now and let you all get a nice cup of tea or coffee
Thank you.
or whatever your cultural preference might be. Bye now.
Bye.
Bye.